Every gardener dreams of having a thriving worm population, the living engine that turns waste into soil gold. But while modern vermicomposting setups often come with price tags and imported worms like red wigglers, the truth is that old-world gardeners never bought a single worm. They bred them. With patience, scraps, and a simple open-bottom bucket, they learned how to invite and multiply native composting worms, species already adapted to their soil, climate, and organic matter. The result was a steady, self-sustaining colony that enriched their beds year after year without ever needing to be replaced. The secret lies in working with local worms instead of importing delicate species. Worms are not universal. The ones living under your mulch, near compost piles, or beneath leaf litter are already conditioned to your soil conditions and temperature swings. They may not have fancy names, but they are survivors. Native decomposers that reproduce fast once given a consistent food source and moisture balance. The problem is that most gardeners ignore these natural workers while paying for imported worms that struggle or die after the first dry spell. The old world approach flips this logic. Instead of importing life, it encourages it. By setting up a bottomless bucket or an old tire habitat, you create an irresistible environment that attracts native composting worms from the soil below and keeps them thriving where you need them most. Start with a simple open-bottom bucket or tire and place it where the soil stays cool. Find an old plastic bucket, around 15 to 20 liters in size, or use a worn-out tire stacked on the ground. Cut the bottom of the bucket completely off, leaving the sides intact. The open base allows worms to move freely between the soil and your organic matter, ensuring they can escape if conditions become too dry or too wet. This prevents die-offs and keeps the colony self-regulating. Dig a shallow hole just deep enough so the bucket sits snugly in the soil, with about 2 inches of its rim above ground. This partially buried setup maintains consistent temperature and moisture, 2 essentials for worm survival. Place the bucket in a shaded spot near a compost heap, vegetable bed, or under a tree canopy where it won't bake in the sun. Once your bucket is positioned, start with a moist bedding layer. Mix 1 part shredded cardboard or dry leaves with 1 part aged compost or topsoil. This gives structure, airflow, and microbial inoculation. The texture should be slightly damp, about as wet as a wrung-out sponge. Now add your first feeding layer, a mix of nitrogen-rich kitchen scraps such as vegetable peels, coffee grounds, wilted greens, and crushed eggshells. Avoid meat, oils, and citrus. These discourage worms and attract pests. Cover the scraps with another thin layer of dry leaves or shredded paper. This helps prevent flies and odors while maintaining the carbon-nitrogen balance essential for decomposition. If you're using ratios, aim for roughly 3 parts browns, which are dry, carbon-rich materials, to 1 part greens, which are wet, nitrogen-rich materials. This ratio mirrors the natural layering of a forest floor and prevents the pile from going anaerobic. Each time you add scraps, bury them lightly and cover again with a small handful of dry material. Within a few weeks, you'll begin to see signs of life. The bucket's lower layers will darken, and if you lift a bit of the bedding, tiny native composting worms will appear, often smaller and darker than commercial red wigglers. These worms are naturally drawn to decaying organic matter, and your bucket provides the ideal refuge, moist, cool, and nutrient-rich. If the soil around your garden already contains worms, you won't need to add any, but if your area seems barren, you can speed things up by collecting a few from under old mulch piles, rotting logs, or leaf heaps. Drop them into your bucket habitat and let them multiply naturally. Native species reproduce steadily once conditions stabilize, producing cocoons that hatch every few weeks. By maintaining consistent moisture and feeding gradually, you can build a thriving population through the winter. Each month, new cocoons hatch, and by spring your bucket will contain hundreds of worms working the compost continuously. Worms breathe through their skin, so moisture is non-negotiable. If your bucket begins to dry out, sprinkle it with rainwater or a few handfuls of damp compost. Never flood it. Light, frequent moisture is better than heavy soaking. A breathable lid or burlap cover helps retain humidity while keeping pests out. Feeding should follow the rhythm of breakdown. Add new scraps only after the previous batch begins to disappear. Overfeeding suffocates worms and slows decomposition. Under normal conditions, a 20-liter bucket can process about 1 to 2 kilograms of scraps per week once it's established. An easy way to gauge balance is by, checking the smell and texture. A healthy worm bucket smells earthy and just a little sweet. But if it turns sour, or kind of muddy, add more dry matter and stop feeding for a few days until the balance returns. After several months, the bottom of the bucket will be filled with dark, crumbly worm castings, the gold standard compost that improves soil structure and plant growth better than any chemical fertilizer. At this stage, simply lift the bucket, scoop out half the castings, and let the worms retreat downward. The removed material can be mixed into garden beds or used to brew worm tea. If you want to multiply your colony, place a second open-bottom bucket nearby and transfer a few handfuls of the living bedding with worms into it. Within weeks, the new bucket will establish its own population. In this way, 2 buckets become 4, and soon your entire garden benefits from active worm zones converting waste to fertility. This method works equally well with tires, wooden boxes, or sunken clay pots, anything that keeps the composting zone protected yet connected to the soil. Over time, the worms spread through your garden beds, naturally enriching soil texture, improving drainage, and increasing microbial diversity, without ever needing to buy or import worms. This is the self-sustaining way every gardener should be managing organic waste. Breeding your own composting worms for free isn't a modern trick, it's a return to what gardeners once understood instinctively, that abundance begins underground. With nothing more than a bucket, scraps, and patience, you can grow a permanent local worm colony that powers your composting all year long. If this guide helps you take the next step toward living soil and self-sufficient gardening, subscribe to Gentle Herb Living and share this with fellow gardeners who still think worm farming requires expensive kits. The truth is simpler, older, and far more rewarding, and it begins right beneath your feet.